Well, good morning, everybody. We're just going to wait a minute or so to let people enter, and then we'll get cracking. I can see people coming in. So, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This is the longest I've ever heard Patrick being so quiet. Very impressive. You're allowed to respond if I'm abusing you.
Well, I could go on mute and move my mouth.
Yeah.
I was wondering how many time zones we cover. It'd be quite an interesting survey.
Yeah, I think we certainly get obviously North America. We generally get people certainly from India and from Europe are sort of our biggest catchment areas. Although I'm sure people like Edelweiss and crew from South America will join as well. So
yeah, so probably 12 time zones.
Yeah. All right. I think things are slowing down. So I'm going to make a start. So Ashish, if you can drive. And we've got some people putting in where they're from. I can just read some of the chats very quickly, but as we start. So we got Washington State, Atlanta, St. Louis, Portland, Oregon. Hey, I'm in Newport, Oregon at the moment. Raleigh, North Carolina, Huntsville, Alabama, Bangalore, India. There we are. Bengaluru, India, Dallas, Texas, Rochester, New York, Boston. Brilliant. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to get stuck in. So I'm Roger Cresey, the host for today, and we'll be talking today. Patrick Wheeler and Ashish Jain have been co-opted and in fact are very gracefully giving up time for us. They're talking to us about Essbase on OCI integration and autonomous database, or ADW as we know it. So just very quickly, I am one of the founders of the Cubics Group. We're an Oracle Cloud certified partner company and we operate around the world. We implement ERP, EPM, and analytics solutions alongside our customers. In respect of this, I've been volunteering alongside an amazing gang of people in various capacities with the analytics and data Oracle user community. And it's a real honor to be involved and be able to contribute with this group of people. So let me do some housekeeping quickly before I formally introduce our two guests. So we've got a helpful links slide, and these will actually be copied and pasted into the chat for you. But all of these, this deck and the recording of it will be put on our TechCast archive and in YouTube, so you'll be able to get at these. So just to talk about some of the TechCasts, we'd love you to submit your proposals for TechCasts. There's a place on the website to do it at. You'll see on the archive, actually, we've got some good stuff coming up as well. On September the 23rd, we've got Unlocking the Hidden Value of ERP Data with Jeremy Simmons. And then we've got our TechCast days from October the 12th to the 14th. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. November the 4th, Oracle Machine Learning in Propensity to Buy Modeling with Joe Darchewski. So, and the last TechCast we did was August the 5th, and that was OML services for real-time scoring in digital process automation with Ralph Mueller. That was actually a fun session. We've got merchandise these days. So again, you can access this from the website. And a lot of these are the creation of Abby Giles. And she is a very creative lady. And so there's things that are not just your normal run-of-the-mill merchandise. come and connect with us. So you'll see we've got a number of different ways you connect. Also, we'll put these links into the chat for you. Faithful Carrie is helping us with the logistics of this. Just like to commend her. She's an amazing person helping us with these techcasts. So yeah, there's obviously you can do it via Slack. We've got a newsletter that goes out every day with suitable articles in relation to our areas of focus. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, and on Facebook. So just really to talk a little bit about the TechCast days. This is a series of 3 days, and effectively they're in 3 different streams: machine learning, spatial and graph, and analytics plus. That's from October the 12th to the 14th. They're generally around 3 hours per day. So come along and join the sessions, and obviously all that material will be recorded and kept in our archives as well. So yeah, I've already talked to you about submitting abstracts. We'd be very interested in hearing how you tackle the world with Oracle's tools. So I think just before I formally introduce the team and hand over, all questions, please don't put them into the chat. Please put your questions into the Q&A submissions area. There's a Q&A slot at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Pop them in there, and I'll keep an eye on those. Obviously, Patrick and Ashish are double teaming it, so they may answer them on the fly in the actual question area itself. Some of them we may answer later on. So without further ado, first of all, Patrick Wheeler. He's Vice President, Product Management for Oracle Database. He's based in Redwood Shores, California, with product management responsibilities including Oracle Multi-Tenant, Oracle Data Integrator, Oracle Enterprise Data Quality, and Oracle Essbase, obviously my first love. He's got a portfolio of products that spans the data management spectrum. So bringing all of these into the autonomous database, his current focus is to build on this rich heritage and extend the benefits of autonomy beyond the DBA to other players in the data management space. And it's certainly something we're seeing evidence of. A little bit about Patrick. He plays in the mountains. He skis in the winter, and he does mountain biking in the summer. So he is actually human outside of those numbers. Ashish, he's got over 17 years of experience in data analytics, data warehousing, and business intelligence, and worked across domains like insurance and pharmaceuticals as a solution consultant in his past. He's now a product manager for Oracle MOLAP engine, Essbase, specializing in providing a platform for our customers to build analytics solutions using Essbase, autonomous database, and Oracle Analytics. And so his main responsibilities include delivering the product strategy and roadmap for Essbase and the Oracle Autonomous Database solution. His current focus is to actually start to meld in things like leveraging the data science and machine learning in products and solutions that are being built by him and his team. And in terms of something a little bit personal about Ashish, he's a music lover, but over the weekends, he likes to spend time conducting sessions for children in general education and historic events of ancient India, so that they get to imbibe the values of a rich culture and heritage of India. Yeah, again, add some character. So without delaying anymore, let me hand over to you, folk. Patrick, I think you're probably going first.
I'm going first. Yes, thank you for that introduction, Roger. We've got to live up to that now, Ashish. I'm feeling the pressure. Thanks for the opportunity to address your audience today. Good day, everyone. In this session, we'll be focusing on the integration of Essbase with autonomous database. That was a theme, I think, that came through in both of our little bios there. Something we think about all day long, every day. The takeaway from this presentation is that these complementary technologies are better together. So that'll be a theme you'll hear throughout here. I've got a few introductory slides, but I'll be brief because the meat of the presentation today will be delivered by Ashish. Next slide, please. Now I look on this roadmap with great satisfaction. It's color-coded. The red milestones are still ahead of us, but we have some very important ones already achieved. We first released Essbase on the OCI Marketplace about 2 years ago. And since then, we've released 21C for deployment both on premises and on OCI. This was followed with 21.2 with several important features. We covered all of those at Kscope, but today's session is focused on just one of them, which is Federated Partitions. We expect to release 21C for Windows later this year. And looking ahead, we plan to continue to enhance the Federated Partitions functionality over successive releases. Next slide, please. Now, more and more of our customers are already using 21C, and that's great. This is the version we recommend that everyone use. Older deployments fall into 3 major segments. 11G on premises, of course, and in the cloud, we've either got OAC Essbase or 19C deployed from the OCI Marketplace. Now, for all customers in each of these segments, our strong recommendation is this: upgrade now to 21C. I hope that message is clear. Next slide, please. So several years ago, we had a reorg at Oracle, which we view as bringing Essbase to its rightful home, which is the database organization. And in today's session, we'll be showing some of the major benefits of that union. In short, these 2 data management technologies are better together with benefits to both constituencies. Essbase users get direct access to source data without having to wait for a data load. And traditional, what I call the row and column database guys, get access to the power of sophisticated multidimensional analysis. So perhaps a data analyst would have access to important capabilities that we've highlighted here. Things like planning and analysis, scenario management, smart view. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Ashish, who's going to take us through the most important part of today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Roger, for that introduction. And yeah, we'll get going. So as Patrick mentioned, 21C is the way forward for all our Essbase users, right? And basically, we have 2 deployment models for Essbase. We have what we call independent deployment, or historically known as on-prem deployment, or deployments to any supported cloud. So with independent deployments, people can take our installer and install it either in their data center, in OCI, or in some supported cloud. And then there is this OCI Marketplace, which has been out there for a couple of years now. But now we have the latest release, 21C, out. There are a few differences between these 2. In the independent deployment, we support EAS Lite and integration with Hyperion Shared Services Security. That's something a lot of our on-prem customers coming from the historical deployments would want. And so we've brought that into the fold for our independent deployments. There are failover configurations that the customers can do with these deployments. On the marketplace, we don't support EAS Lite. We have the new GUI, web-based GUI, and of course the Cube Designer, which we will use which we'll see actually in our demo as well. On the cloud, we support integration with IDCS, and currently failover configurations are not available out of the box on the marketplace releases, but we plan to bring that into the fold in subsequent releases. But today we have documented steps and certain helpful scripts that allow you to do this sort of backup and recovery kind of operations. But then one other thing that is very much important and different is the federated partition feature will only be supported on OCI deployments. And basically that involves integration with the autonomous database. So that's something which our independent deployment option will not be supporting. Now, before we get into the demo, I want to talk a little bit about the recent release, the release update that we had in June was 21.2. We spoke about these at Kscope. So a lot of these features come from our customers. They request for these features, and we've been constantly improving our UI, for example. So we've introduced improved capabilities or made it easy for users to define their data load and dim build rule files. We've brought in consistency, from a design time versus runtime perspective. So whatever changes we've made design time, those are now available runtime as well with the new jobs UI. We continue to enhance or improve the capabilities and features that are available in Cube Designer. So users can now edit and execute calc scripts. And of course, there is a new backup and restore way of OCI Marketplace. We have added scripts, made changes to them so that it suits different kinds of deployment option. So those will be documented as well. But again, the focus of our discussion today is the Essbase on autonomous database, or integration of Essbase with the autonomous database with the feature which we call Federated Partitions. Okay. So we'll spend just a couple of minutes talking about what is Federated Partition, right? So Federated Partition, we've had this feature sort of undocumented for a long time in our OAC Essbase releases. However, we've kind of made it more frontline or more streamlined in the 21.2 release. So it provides the Essbase functionality on ADW is one way to look at it. The other ways to look at is the providing ADW users or Essbase users with the power of autonomous database. So from an ADW user perspective, we bring the powerful calc engine that Essbase is to our relational users. Essbase historically has been known to be very open. It provided APIs so customers can build their own custom analytic applications. So we continue that tradition. We introduced REST APIs. Those will be available to our users. We provide powerful what-if analysis and write-back capability to do some of these planning and scenario management kind of activities to our autonomous users. And more importantly, we bring the powerful and the intuitive smart view interface for performing data analysis. Now, if you look at from an analysis perspective, there are kind of two, maybe three ways in which users do the analysis. One is, of course, if you're a relational user, you write complex SQL, you enjoy writing SQL, and you write complex SQL, do the analysis. The other end of the spectrum is this new wave of data visualization tools like Oracle Analytics or Tableau or Click that the users like to use for their analysis. But historically, we've seen a lot of the users leverage Excel for their analysis, right? Whenever you get a file in an email or you download a file from somewhere, you want to look at it, the first thing you do kind of today is launch Excel and do your analysis. So what now with the integration that Essbase with autonomous database brings to the table is that Excel interface to our relational users. And we'll look at it in our demo as well. From an Essbase perspective, this integration brings a lot more benefits as well, right? Users can now leverage the data that is available in their source system, which will be the autonomous database. So users don't necessarily have to go through the latency related issues for bringing the data from their source system into an Essbase engine and then do their analysis. And if they are rebuilding their cubes or making changes to their outlines, that necessitates the requirement for cube rebuilds or restructuring. So we eliminate those kind of bottlenecks. From an Essbase perspective, we push down the aggregation or the powerful calculation back to the source system where it is done the best. So you aggregate the data from the source and then apply the business rules that you apply on the Essbase side and then leverage it for your analysis. Essbase autonomous database internally has Analytic Views, so we'll look at it a little bit more. Of course, this integration leverages the optimized in-memory capabilities of the database. The Essbase engine has been optimized to better work together. And more often, we've seen there are large data sets that the Essbase users want to do for analysis. And autonomous database allows or supports these large data sets, whether it is in an object store or you want to load the data directly into the autonomous database, you can leverage Essbase on top of it as well. However, today in the first release, the 21.2 that we talk about, we have certain limitations, right? We only kind of support rack and stack cubes where you load or have the data for your lower level members, all your upper level members are dynamically calculated, and hybrid cubes are supported. However, as we move forward, as you saw Patrick mentioned with the red dots in the roadmap, we want to include more features like calc support, for example, in the future releases. So that's something we plan to do as well. Now, this is a quick schematic of how this feature works, right? So at the bottom layer, we have the autonomous database. Within that, we have the core database engine where your fact tables are stored, where your data is available. So that data comes directly from the database. On the top, we have the Essbase outline or the metadata that allows you to define these complex business rules or aggregation steps. It helps you define business hierarchies and so on and so forth in the outline. And then what we leverage is the analytic views that are available within the autonomous database that kind of works with the Essbase engine, the multidimensional engine that Essbase is. It works with the analytic views to provide you a curated business model from this flat relational structured tables that you have in the database. So you bring a lot of business context to the data that is stored in the autonomous database in a relational table. And we'll sort of without further ado, now we will look at how we can do this. So we'll switch over to the demo. Okay, so I'll just make sure that I am still connected here. Okay, cool. So we'll start from the beginning, right? How do you start leveraging or using this feature from the time when you decide to use it, deploying Essbase in OCI, working with the autonomous database and how that integration works. So for starters, you would choose to deploy Essbase. So here in this case, I am going to the marketplace. I look at one of the listings, which is Oracle Essbase UCM, and I launch the stack and make sure the release is 21.2 because that's the release that supports this new feature. So I'm not going to go in detail about the deployment steps, but one key thing that you need to be aware of is something that I would like to show here. So when you're deploying your Essbase instance, there is a section called database configuration. Here, you have to make sure that you choose the option is use existing database. And essentially, we want the users to leverage an already deployed autonomous database. So I'll switch over to my screen here. And within the same tenancy, within the same compartment, I have 3 Oracle autonomous databases running. Now, one thing I have to make sure is I have to have a up and running autonomous database or data warehouse. So in this case, I'll leverage the middle one here, Essbase public, Essbase ADW public, ADB public. So once I come here, I should be able to see in the dropdown that Essbase ADB public. So one of the requirements is a pre-deployed autonomous data warehouse. And when you're deploying Essbase, you choose that existing autonomous database. So here you would provide an OCID for the OCID secret key for the password for this autonomous database. So let's say we've gone through the steps of the deployment and we've chosen this autonomous database. I already have an instance. I want to show you how this would look in the autonomous database. So I'm going to log in as the admin of the autonomous database. And we'll look at the users first. So this is the admin user. The current user is admin. I have a schema called DWH. So now this is my data warehouse where I have all my business data, right? I have my star schemas, or I have my fact table, my dimension tables, all my business data. There are processes that load into this data, maybe as a nightly batch, and so on and so forth. So this is my schema that will provide me the data for analysis. And when I chose an existing autonomous database instance, I see these sort of RCU schemas that are created in the same database. So So this is one of the prerequisites, and this is how it would look. Okay. So now we'll quickly look at how a user will go about. So now we have identified, we have an Essbase instance deployed, we have an autonomous database with my data warehouse in there as well. So what are the steps that are involved in creating these this integration? So the first thing is, of course, you need to determine an Essbase application that you will build, which kind of coordinates or functions well with the fact table data that is already available in my data warehouse. So the steps 1 and 2 kind of go hand in hand. So we'll look at those two things first. So what I'll do first is I'll log on to my autonomous database as a data warehouse user and identify the fact table on which I want to do my analysis. Maybe I want to do some what if analysis, sensitivity analysis, or some sort of a planning for subsequent years. So now I have this autonomous database and I have a table called SimFinance. So let me just, and people that have used Essbase long enough, this data is based off of the sample basics application that we have, demo application that we have in Essbase. So here they will be very much familiar with this data set. But anyways, it's a very simple data set. We have a product dimension, we have a market dimension, so data that represents all my different products, the different states in which these products are sold. The granularity of data in this fact table is at the month level. So I have the month data, and I have my current year and prior year data stored as a scenario dimension. And then I have certain metrics like sales, cost of goods sold, my expenses like marketing expenses, payroll, miscellaneous expenses, so on and so forth. So these are the metrics that are stored in this fact table. So now the goal is to identify or build an Essbase application, build an outline that kind of works well with this data for my analysis. I also have inventory data. So inventory data rolls up slightly differently. We'll understand that as well. So here I see that I'm using Cube Designer to build my Essbase application. So I have my year dimension. Measures are nothing but the sales, COGS, and the expenses and inventory related items that we saw. We have the product dimension, market dimension, and the scenario dimension. Again, a little bit more details. These are my month level data, but within Essbase now I'm defining my hierarchy, right? I have only monthly level data in Essbase, in the data warehouse, but I'm rolling those months up to quarters and the quarters roll up to years. So I'm defining more business rules here. Similarly, in my product dimension, the fact table has really only the product SKU level data, for example. Then I'm defining the product hierarchy within Essbase. Similarly, for market, like regions, states are available in the fact table, but I am organized as regions and markets. I could have multitude of different kinds of hierarchies that I can define within Essbase. And we also have the measures dimension. So if I were to quickly look at the hierarchy of how my measures dimension is built, I see that I have my sales COGS. So all these level 0 members that you see here are something which will kind of map to a column, a metric column in the fact table. Now, this is what we will become the pivot dimension when we are defining the federated partition. So we have the sales, COGS, all the other metrics. And what I have also done is I have certain driver members that will allow me to do what if analysis. And we'll look at this in a little bit more detail later on. But this is how I've organized my Essbase application. So the first thing to do is build the application. So I'm going to leverage Cube Designer to build the application. So I'll click on build cube and run. So while this cube is building, I will quickly navigate to the browser UI and launch the Essbase GUI. Okay. Okay. So let's log in to the GUI. I hope by the time I log in, I'll actually see that application show up as well. So yeah, here you go. The application is created, which is called Sim, and it just got created. If I go back to Excel, I should get a pop-up that says the application is built. Yeah, I got a pop-up on the other screen for some reason, but here it is, right? So it says the job completed. So I'll click on, I don't want to look at the logs. I'm okay. This application is built. So now let's quickly query the data here, right? So within Cube Designer, I have this option to call query connected sheet, analyze query connected sheets. I'll reuse the sheet contents. And voila, I don't see any data. And that is expected because the data still sits in the autonomous database and I haven't gone ahead and defined the federated partition. So I don't see any data come in now. So the next step to do is really to define the federated partition on this application. So how do you do that? The first thing you need to make sure is you have created a source or a connection to this autonomous data warehouse. I already have it created, so let me quickly edit it and show you. So when you are creating a federated partition, make sure you choose this option, repository database. Now the Essbase server already has the kind of the secret file, the wallet file that it needs to connect. So once you check this, it leverages the connection information or the wallet that it already has. You can choose the different options here. For this version, we recommend using the low connection. And then the schema on which you have your data that you want to work off of. So here I'm connecting to the data warehouse schema, and I'm just quickly making sure that I can connect. So yes, I can connect. So once the connection is created, the next step is to go ahead and define the federated partition. So I go over to the database inspector, click on partition. So this is a new partition type that you will create, which is called federated partition. You can have only one application or one database in the application and one federated partition per database. So here I choose the connection on where my data warehouse table exists. So it's connected. So I know the fact table name is Sim Finance. So I choose the Sim Finance, and here there's an option of pivot dimension. Now this is really what I was trying to allude to earlier, is make sure you define your Essbase application which works well with the fact table that you have, or you may design a fact table that works well with this application. So in this case, I have identified sales and COGS and all my revenue metrics, my inventory metrics are really the columns in the fact table that represents the metrics, and that is defined in my measures dimension. So I choose the pivot dimension as the measures dimension. Notice on the right-hand side, it has already done some mappings. You'll see that on the left, we have the fact table column names, and on the right, it matches the members from the measures dimensions, all the level 0 stored members from the measures dimension. And then we also have dimension mappings. So apart from the measures dimensions, there are these other year, product, market, and scenario, which were actually kind of the dimension columns in my fact table, right? So I have the product, market, year, and scenario here. So that's the mapping that we do here. So I'll quickly validate this. The partition definition is valid, so I will save this now. Now here we get a pop-up saying the application will be restarted. That's fine. That's a requirement. So now while this federated partition information is saving, I want to show you quickly, make sure I reconnect here and show you, I already had one application that was using a federated partition. So I already have one analytic view created. Now, okay, independent transactions, that's fine. So now if I were to refresh this, I'll see that the new analytic view is created. So that's how we leverage the capabilities within the autonomous database. I'm using SQL Developer here to just show the analytic view that got created through this process. So the analytic view, the federated partition is created here, backend in the database, it creates these analytic views and certain internal sort of metadata tables. So if I refresh this, we'll see a bigger list of tables. So these are the tables that internally it created. So that's done. So now we have the federated partitions created. Let me go back to Smart View and do a refresh now. Okay. So now, yes, now the federated partition is created. We hooked up the Essbase application with the fact table. So now we are actually seeing the data come directly from the fact table. Okay. So any changes now that happens to the backend database would kind of reflect here. So that way we have like near real-time access to the data. We don't have to perform any data loads. We are directly querying the data now from the autonomous database. So now the other important thing that Essbase brings to the relational users that we were talking about earlier is this interface, the Smart View interface. I'll not go too much in detail about this, but then now Smart View interface understands the hierarchies, the business hierarchies that are defined in Essbase. And of course, through federated partitions, we are bringing data directly from the warehouse. So if I had to get this data that I see now, I would simply write a query. Actually, it will not be a very simple query. I'll tell you the reason. So let me zoom in first. So I'm zooming in on the measures. I have certain profit related metrics. I have certain inventory related metrics, and I have some calculated members, ratios, and so on and so forth. Let's focus only on profit. So I'm going to zoom and keep only profit. So I'm only interested in doing profit analysis. Now, once I select the member profit and I say zoom in all levels, so now I'm seeing my my chart of accounts. So I'm really seeing hierarchical data off of a relational flat structured table in the database. Now the database only has sales, cost of goods sold numbers, bear in mind at the month level, but I am looking at these numbers at the quarterly level, which means that if I zoom in, if I select Q1 and zoom in, so now I see, okay, now I'm seeing 678 is the sales for the month of Jan for the cola product in New York, and these are my current year actual sales. So notice, if I had to write a SQL query to build this kind of a grid, it'll be very complex, right? All the green cells kind of represent a fact table row, okay? And whatever you see in the blue numbers are the business logic that Essbase has, sort of brought to the table here. We also have context. We have the different hierarchy measures represented as a hierarchy. So for example, my margin is calculated as sales minus cost of goods sold. That's business rule that is stored in Essbase. What are the total expenses? Those are the expenses for the children. Marketing, payroll, and miscellaneous expenses add up as total expenses for Jan. So now we can immediately see the benefit that a database user, once they define a federated partition in Essbase and define certain business rules in Essbase, can really view the data in context. Okay, so that's one aspect of it. The other thing that I want to show is write-back. Now, we don't fully support write-backs. For small write-backs, like a few rows that are updated in the fact table, we support it in this current release, assuming, of course, that the user have access to the backend table. So now let me, okay, sorry, I want to show one more feature for a relational user. So I have this grid setup. I'll explain to you. First, let me query the data. Okay, so now earlier I didn't have any data. Now I'm fetching the data directly from the database. All the green cells are sort of kind of rows coming directly from the fact table. But if you look at inventory kind of metric, or if in banking transactions parlance, if you look at balance related metrics, you don't typically aggregate balances, let's say for Jan, Feb, and March, and show them in quarter. There are certain rules that apply to these kinds of metrics. So for example, my initial inventory for Q1 is actually the initial inventory for Jan, and the ending inventory for Q1 is the ending inventory for March. So I see here there are Jan, Feb, and March in the quarter. So the initial inventory for Jan is 2021. So the quarterly initial inventory is 2101. And the ending inventory for quarter is the March month's ending inventory. So you'll notice that these are not simple aggregates, right? You are having certain business rules. Now, Essbase understands these kinds of hierarchical structures, and we call it time balance measures. And those are something that you can easily define in Essbase. Now, let me quickly show you one other thing of doing some sensitivity analysis. So I have a grid that is set up here in SmartView, and you can build this easily yourself once you start getting used to working with SmartView. It's very simple. It's very user intuitive. So here, again, I have Cola, New York, and these are my sales numbers for the month of January. I have actual metric, which is the current year sales or the current year metrics, and prior year actuals or the prior year numbers. So for New York Cola, Jain, sales was 678. What I've also done is I've put a logic in the Essbase cube, which says the forecast. So which is, I'm trying to forecast my numbers for the next year. And the initial rule that I have set up is to say that my forecast numbers are average of my prior 2 years, right? Current year actuals and the prior year actuals. So this number is actually an average of these two, for example. Now, let's say I want to do some what if analysis. So I have created an additional scenario member called what if, and I've introduced some business logic in Essbase. And these are my driver numbers that I talked about earlier. So let's say I'm anticipating based on the forecasted number, I want to go aggressive on my sales, and I'll say, okay, I want to go increase my sales by 7% in the next year, and I want to cut down on costs. So I want to cut down on some marketing expenses and so on and so forth. I'm anticipating a 3% reduction in my marketing expenses or overall costs that are incurred to me. So notice I also have these variance measures that are calculated. Right now, my forecast numbers and what if numbers are the same. So there is no variance. But now let's understand, if I were to do these kinds of business strategy, how would it impact the profit, let's say, for example. So I have written back these numbers, and I see that in absolute numbers, I will see a $46,000 increase in my sales numbers. And costs would notice now, actually, the cost is reduction. So this number is not negative, it's actually positive, but a negative reduction in cost is a good thing. So this is another sort of financial understanding that Essbase has, that if you are going down on costs, that's a good thing. So that's how you define in Essbase. So notice this number is actually additive. Now it's beneficial by $7,000. So now I have done some analysis, and I see that if I were to, let's say, get a 7% increase in sales, 3% reduction in cost, for New York, I would see absolute $54K profit, and which is a 22% increase over what I actually forecasted. So that I can now see this analysis quickly. Now, let's say the another feature that I want to show is with relates to expenses, right? So there is another feature in Essbase Smart View which says I want to decrease my expenses by 10%, right? So whatever the value in that cell, adjust that to reduce by 10%. So now I'm saying instead of $150,000 that I spend on these expenses, I'm only going to spend $135,000. So let's submit that number. And notice there is a change that happened here as well. So initially, I forecasted $150,000 as my expenses, but I am going to do $135,000. Now, I want to allocate this number $135,000 to its children based on the ratio for the forecasted number. So I've actually performed an allocation of $135,000 to its children based on a certain business rule. So now I have this business rules that, so further, if I reduce my total expenses by 10%, at the New York level, I was originally expecting a 22% increase in profit, but now if I reduce the cost further, I see a 28% increase in my profits. Also, Essbase understands hierarchical data, right? So East is made up of multiple states. I've just done this analysis for New York. I can do this similarly for all other states. I'm not going to do that now here, but then once I do that analysis, I can look at the impact it has at the East level or even at the overall market level. So now with a simple sales data that I have in my fact table, I'm able to do this kind of very complex analysis. Okay. Now I want to show other quick things which are generally possible, let's say directly with AVs or with let's say Oracle Analytics, for example. But then people who live in the world of Excel and they want to do their analysis in Excel, there are these other metrics that you can derive as well, right? So for example, here I'm showing the rank for the different markets that I deal in based on the sales. So of course, West is the market rank number 1 because it has the highest sales. Now, if I were to click on East, or let's say I select all these 4 regions and I zoom in on them, now I'll see the rank in context. So earlier I was saying East was the number 3 rank, but within East, I have these 5 states and I can get the ranking for those states. So these are the complex or different hierarchical navigation that you can do within SmartView, define your multidimensional database in Essbase, and do these kind of metrics in context. So now I see that New York is the number 1 from a rank perspective within its siblings or within East. So these are the different kinds of analysis that you can do. I have another analysis for market share. Similarly, again, I have a new metric defined market share. If I zoom in on it, now I double click on it. So it's a very intuitive user interface. And now I see the market share at that level between its siblings. So this is the market share that will sum up to 100. So, and then all of these would sum up to 100. And of course, at the market level, you have the 100% market share. So that was a quick demo about how you can leverage the new features of this integration with of Essbase with Autonomous Database. I'll quickly go back to my slides. So here is a quick, this slide kind of reiterates the demo that I did, right? What are the benefits of this new feature that we've brought to the fold here? And what are some of the cautions? Now, cautions are really more from the perspective of the current release product that we have. So from a benefits perspective, we talk about the expensive data load cycles, the latency it brings, the expensive restructures that need to happen in case of updates to the cube. The other benefit that the Essbase users get is they can work on large data sets, leverage the in-memory functionality that the Essbase, the Autonomous Database has to offer. And the Analytic Views internally leverage some of these capabilities of the database that are provided. And one other thing which is very important, and we saw that in context in terms of financial intelligence, in terms of time intelligence, this is something what we call the expressiveness that the Essbase brings to the data that is really flat, sort of semi-structured data, flat data that resides in a relational database. So we add that expressiveness to this flat data set that exists in the database. Now, some of the cautions more pertaining to the current release that we have, and we plan to eliminate some of these kind of limitations or cautions. Number one, not all Essbase functionality is available through the Federated Partition feature. So if there is any Essbase user that wants to leverage this capability, it's really kind of rack and stack cube, dynamic hybrid cube, really that works well today. You can't do large number of writebacks. We are still working with our database counterparts to make this an optimal way of doing large updates. Calc scripts are currently not available, but we plan to bring them in a subsequent release. And some of the other details like outline-based calculations kind of still happen on the Essbase side. In the true sense, we want to push the processing where it is done best. So in the subsequent releases, as we become more tightly integrated with the Autonomous Database, we'll add a lot of those capabilities. So on a final note, what are the key takeaways from our presentation today, right? Number one, whatever Essbase release you are on, please plan to upgrade to 21C ASAP. Leverage the latest and the greatest of the Essbase technology, whether you are on-prem or on the cloud. Move to 21C ASAP. This is the way going forward. We'll have subsequent releases at a very significant pace, right? You saw the roadmap slide that Patrick presented. We are doing quarterly releases in terms of patches, and major releases will happen in the future. 21C has a lot of key enhancements and a lot of bug fixes for our existing OAC or even 19C customers. So that's the way forward there. And of course, we are bringing in a lot of enhancements in the future releases. From a federated standpoint and from an integration standpoint with the Autonomous Database, these are great, really, right? We want to leverage the best of both of these worlds, right? The relational worlds and the multidimensional worlds. So what does Essbase has to offer for, or this integration has to offer for Essbase users? We've been talking about the restructures, data load, access to real-time data, and larger data sets. with the integration that we have with the autonomous database, we bring the reliability and scalability of the autonomous database it has to offer for Essbase user. And of course, with this, now we expand the Essbase use cases to a larger community. From a database standpoint, Essbase brings the centralized and the powerful calc engine, centralized business rules, powerful calc engine. Users can now build curated business models, add more context to the data that is there in the relational database. We looked at how Smart View can be leveraged to, instead of writing select star from table group by, all those complex analytic applications or SQLs, leverage the Smart View to query your data. And you can, as we saw in this example, you can run some simple planning scenarios if you want to leverage that for the data that already resides in the autonomous database. So with that, I come to the end. And of course, if there are any Q&As, pretty sure there would have been questions.
Yeah, great demo. Thank you very much, Ashish. I learned a lot there as well. I hope the rest of you did too. Roger, we've used a lot of time. I still have a few open questions, but I want to be respectful of your timing. How do you want to handle this?
No, so what we'll do is we've still got a lot of folk on the call. So I'm sorry we've gone slightly over, but I think it's been well worth it today. I'd love for us to just walk through. We've got quite a lot of questions outstanding. And so, yeah, if we can answer a few of those just live, and we'll take to the top of the hour, I think, and obviously any of those, any folk who are able to stay on until the top of the hour, then please do. So maybe we should work through some of the questions. If I ask the question, and just please, if you're looking at the Q&A, go into the Q&A and see the ones that have been answered already, because there's some fairly interesting things there. But so first question, if I just call them out and whichever of you decides to address them. Chris Boland says, in today's demo, is any data stored in Essbase, i.e. the upper level blocks?
Yeah, in today's demo, as I mentioned, it's a rack and stack cube. So all the upper level members are dynamic. They are calculated at runtime. Okay,
and then Glenn Schwartzberg. Hi, Glenn. Nice to see you on the call. How are members in the fact table but not in Essbase handled? Renegade members.
Yeah, so this one is an interesting question. So we are still now, as I mentioned earlier, this one is kind of our first step in a maybe in a 20-step journey. We don't know how long. This is a long journey. We've embarked on this right now. But in terms of the current rules is any level 0 stored member, if you want to query that member, it needs to be sort of stored in the fact table. It needs to be a column in the fact table. In the demo that I did, again, all my upper level members were dynamic in nature. But that's a feedback. And one of the reasons why we also did this demo is to understand some of these kind of use cases people like Glenn that bring to the table to see how we can incorporate it in the future releases. So I'll be interested to work with you, Glenn, to see how we can, if you have some use cases or even others who have some use cases that they think is something they can bring or leverage this capability for, then we can work together on that. At least right now, today, all the upper level members are dynamic in nature.
Thanks. Martin Newlip asks, expensive restructures may be eliminated, but presumably outline updates will still be needed. Yes, question mark.
That is correct. That is correct. Okay. Right now, there are certain tables that we create internally. So outline today, from a technical standpoint, outline today is still kind of file-based in this release. But again, our long-term roadmap is to try and leverage the database to store the outline as well. So that's a roadmap item, Martin. Yes.
Okay. And Martin's also asking, are ASO and BSO outlines supported at the moment?
Both, I think both are supported with the Federated Partition. There is a list of limitations that we have. I didn't show that in the demo, but we have documented it. Within the confines of those limitations, yes, both ASO and BSO are supported.
All right, and then Nassar Ali Khan, Analytic Views work well in ADW 19C also. Can Essbase 21C federated partitions be created against ADW 19C?
Actually, the demo that I did was federated partition working against an autonomous database 19C, because autonomous database 21C is not generally available. So the demo that I did was 19C.
Yeah, I thought I saw that in the when you did the configuration.
Yeah.
And then a question from Prakash Junjunwala. Is there any plan to make Essbase a PaaS service and not independent deployment?
Interesting question. So, so we've embarked on this journey, and today, yes, OCI Marketplace is the way forward for our cloud users. As far as kind of when I say, you know, I understand by PaaS you mean like an OCI native service where you don't have to manage the install or the updates and backup and restore and those sorts of things. That's something we are hoping. There is no plan right now, but that's something we could consider for the future. Right now, OCI Marketplace is the way forward for Essbase deployments on the cloud.
Very good. So, I mean, just my own commentary, I think this technology is fantastic. I've really enjoyed today, Ashish and Patrick. I think there's all sorts of immediate applications, even with, you know, notwithstanding some of the limitations that you currently have with federated partitioning, being able to use it for flash sales, or even, you know, a scenario of flash finance, being able to validate and verify numbers. You know, obviously, as we move further into this, being able to use, you know, machine learning and AI to actually check the veracity of numbers in the future. I think this, if you like, marriage of technologies between Essbase and ADW is something that is, I think, is a huge win for the future. So I'm very excited about it. I'm looking for ways, obviously, to make this practically and functionally solutional for our customers. So this has been an excellent session. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Ashish or Patrick, or comment on.
I would just repeat my thanks for the opportunity to share this information. I'm really glad it was so well received. There were some really great questions there. Thank you. And you know, this is you know, just my comment about the analytics and data Oracle user community. I mean, this is a really great community, and some of the input we received here would be very useful. So we'd be very happy to continue to work through you, Roger, to talk, for example, to people like Glenn and others who would like to contribute to this roadmap as we go forward. We're not doing this for nothing. We want to react to your needs. So let's keep talking and keep watching, because we've got some great stuff coming. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes in the next few years with this technology.
Yeah. Well, so with that, thank you everybody for sticking around. I see a lot of you stayed right to the end. So